Good boy, Tucker.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
Hey.
Welcome.
Work smarter where you want.
Consistency is key.
And remember, if it's not in Redtail, it never happened.
This is learning at its most fun.
Welcome. My name is Catherine. I'm one of the trainers here at Redtail Technology. I want to thank you guys right now for joining me on another weekly webinar here. Today we're going to be covering a Redtail Essentials specifically on automation. So if you've never made an automation, great news. We're going to make one today. We'll show you how to do that. But we kind of view this as the magic trick, or our theme this year is the superhero. So this is our superhero power. So we're going to go in how to use it, when you can exactly use it, and then how it exactly applies towards the contact record itself. So let's go ahead. I'm going to jump into my system here, and I'm going to hop onto my Today page, because chances are high when you log in the first time, yours is probably set to this page. Now, if you've never made an automation, you're probably going, that's great, Catherine, where do I go? We'll come up to our name here in the top right-hand corner and click on Manage Your Account. So again, this is kind of where I view my backend, the database, behind the scenes, all that good fun part. And then we're actually going to go under the Manage Templates section, and we're going to actually click on Automation Templates. So again, if you've never built one, this section is going to be blank. I have a couple in here, which I will definitely be showing those once I've already pre-built. But for right this second, we're going to actually start from scratch. We're going to build a brand new one. So on the right here, we'll see this option that says Add. We'll go ahead and click Add. And then we're going to start on a blank little page here titled On This Event. So we're going to start out by just naming our automation. Now, my general rule of thumb is to always approach it in terms of naming it something that's pretty obvious. No one wants you to get too creative where you can't figure out what exactly it is. So in here, I'm actually going to be building something for a new contact / prospect. So I'll just name it something like this, where it's pretty self-explanatory, but I want to even add added. So literally when I read it, I can say that, oh, hey, this automation's on new contact / a prospect being added. The next little blank there is our trigger event. So what exactly is it that's supposed to set this automation? In this particular instance, if a new contact's being added, it's pretty obvious here. We're going to click the contact added. Now, right below this, we have our description. Now here, I'm going to put something only because we have a couple people who like to really clean out our database and take out a bunch of junk stuff. So I want to put in here, do not delete, with a lot of exclamation points. This is our new prospects being added. Automation. Oop, if I can spell. Perfect. So what this is saying here, this is our automation name. It's our new contact prospect being added. And what exactly is the event that's going to cause this is the contact added. And then what exactly, we don't want it to be deleted. This is exactly what it is. So we're all done, right? No, we actually need to set up the next tab of do this action. So what exactly do we want it to do? In this particular instance, I want it to link a workflow from a template. Now, as you can see, we've got a couple of different options. If we had it where we just wanted to let our advisor know that we might have already just added this contact in here, we can email a user, or maybe we have like a client onboarding team. We can let them know, hey, this has been added. So you can set up multiple automations for the same thing. In this particular instance, I'm going to link a workflow from a template. So that last little section is going to go away. I'm going to get one other drop-down section, which is the action item. So I'm going to click in here, and I've actually got a couple in regarding to our prospecting. I actually have a prospecting workflow. I also have an important information list. And this is one thing I do want to point out. If you don't see a workflow that you have, chances are high your workflow is still set as under construction for the status. So just make sure that the workflow you're trying to use is actually set to active. And then from there, you can always see this little option and pick what you want. For this one, I'm actually just going to pick that important information list 2019. What's in there is pretty much just like gather address, gather the phone number, all the good stuff that we need in there. So again, I have my action type as linking a workflow from a template, and which template exactly? My important information list 2019. Now I'm all done, right? Again, no. You could definitely create an automation from this alone. However, if I were to just create this automation without doing any stipulations whatsoever, anytime I add a contact, whether it be an actual client itself, or it could be just a spouse, or maybe it's an employee that you wanted to add in here. Anytime you add that important information list is going to get triggered, which sometimes we necessarily don't need it. So if you don't want it to apply to every single contact that's being added, set stipulations, which is our if all or if any condition. So in this case, I want to be very specific. I want it to apply to if all. So to set a new condition, we'll come to the right, click new condition. And then in here, I'm going to have my contact status. I want it to be equal to a prospect, because again, I'm adding a new contact / prospect. So I want that status to be equal to prospect. So I can add that condition. Now I can definitely create the automation from here. And anytime I add a new prospect from anytime I add a new contact with the status of prospect, it'll trigger this particular automation. However, I want to be very specific. I don't want it to just be any prospect. I want it to be those hot prospects that are most likely going to become a client. So I can set another condition in here. So I'd pick contact category equal to, and I'm going to come in here for that hot prospect. And then I can add that condition. So what I always like to do with a rule of thumb with automations is just kind of read it out loud as a sentence to make sure that it makes sense. So on this event, I have my new contact prospect added automation based upon a contact being added within our system. I want it to link the important information workflow template, specifically when I add a new contact that has the status of prospect and one that has a category as hot. So with this, I can go ahead and create my automation. And you've just built potentially your first automation. We'll go ahead and woo. Now, to actually show it in action, what I can do is I'll add a new contact in my system. So again, we're big into superheroes this year. So I'm actually going to add, he's actually kind of a villain, but I noticed he was in our system, and that's good old Loki Laufey-san. Whoop. Not his middle name, his last name, Laufey-san. I believe I spelled that correct. And for now, I'm not going to worry too much about the whole nickname, CEO, employee, all that good. No, I don't need that. I'm going to actually scroll, ignore address, no, and then all the way to contact details. That's the next item I'm going to focus in on just so we can show this automation. So under status, I'm going to again pick that prospect because that's what he is right now. He's just our prospect. But we have a pretty good feeling about him that he's going to become a client. So I'm going to set that category as hot. And again, I'm not going to worry too much about anything else. I'm not going to worry about any other keywords, tag groups, all that good stuff. I'll get to that eventually. I'm just going to add him in here. So we'll save that contact. We'll let it do its thing. And again, this is kind of my rule of thumb. Whenever it takes a few seconds, that means it's thinking, which is a good thing. So again, we just added Laufey-san. And if you actually notice kind of somewhat in the middle here, we have this active workflow. And if I actually click on this particular number here, I'm going to see that my important information list has automatically been added onto my Loki Laufey-san contact record based upon those stipulations of that prospect in hot status right over here. So if I didn't set something, so if I made this cold, for example, this particular workflow wouldn't have been triggered because that category did not match those particular guidelines, stipulations, however you want to view it for that particular automation. So again, it'll link this active workflow the second you do it, and based upon whatever information you have within your workflow, we'll adjust those dates accordingly. So that's a great one if you've got new prospects and you want to make sure that everything's being filled out. In this instance, I didn't fill out anything, so I'm going to have to double check, make sure I got all that contact information. Now, another big one, and I did actually already build this out, is our client reviews or even like a client meeting. We know we always have these meetings, these client reviews. They're not a mystery. We know they're coming. But we also know there might be certain steps that we do along the way, but we don't want to have to trigger that workflow every single time. So we set an automation for it. So what it would look like, again, I'll pick my name, the manager account. come back to our Manage Templates Automation template section, and I'm actually going to click on the client review add activity. And again, I added a description of please do not delete. This is the workflow for client reviews. So that way we know exactly what it is. But I'll come in here and I'll click. And again, we've made it pretty self-explanatory with a client review and what exactly is triggering this event, which in this instance, it's probably a little hard to see. It's this light gray, but it's saying activity is being added. So an activity itself, the second I quick add or go off of the calendar or even the contact record, however you apply your activities, this will be triggered. However, we also have certain stipulations on this one. So again, we don't want it just free for all. We want it to link specifically a workflow from a template, and we want it to link the client review workflow 2019. And again, just make sure your workflows are active for you to be able to see those and for it to actually work within the system. Now, technically, this could have applied for everything if it was just a meeting and we want it to apply to every time an activity that's titled meeting works. However, we want it specifically for our client reviews, in which case we have our all conditions again. We have our activity type equal to client review, and we have our activity category equal to client review notes. And again, these particular options is going to be based upon what exactly you have in your system. So our activity categories that we have in here, these are all items that we have added within the CRM. So definitely find something that works for you. I can always send you a copy of what exactly we have in our system to give you kind of like an idea. But this is where we can get very specific that we want our particular workflow of client reviews and our particular client review automation to be based around the type and category of client review notes. So to actually see it in action, and again, I'm just going to click cancel because I didn't do anything to it. I'm going to pull up a contact record. Now, I actually spoke with, I spoke with Steve Rogers earlier today. And I realized when I was talking to him that, man, I have not scheduled that client review. I really need to do it. So again, I can add that activity from here. I can add it from the calendar, or I can quick add. Whatever your preference might be. I know we kind of all get our own comfort zone, so just do what you wish with your activities. And again, it's already going to link. And then here, I'm just going to make it client review meeting. Smiley face. Now, obviously, it's not all day, so make sure we uncheck that. I'm just going to put it for, you know what, we'll go with a nice July 8th post-Independence Day, nice thing. And we'll just set it for, you know, maybe I'm going to do a lunch type meeting, and we'll go with that. Now, again, what I was saying with those automations, it's going to be based off of this type section and this category section. So I'm going to make sure that I want to pick that client review as my type, and I want to make sure that I set my category as those client review notes. So I'm good to go from here. I have my what exactly is happening, when, where, why, all that good part. I'm going to go ahead and create that activity. And we'll let it do its thing. And again, anytime it takes a little longer, that means it's doing something. So here we have, woo, it's successfully created, perfect. And again, if you click on that active workflow, you can then see that, hey, here's our client review workflow that just got linked. And again, those particular dates of due dates are going to link based off of our template guidelines. So again, for that particular one, we just had it based off of a particular activity being added. Now, you don't have to do it just for client reviews. You can do it for any particular meeting that you might have or any other particular meetings that are specific. Again, it's just based around those types and categories. So just make sure that those exist in your backend database first to make sure that works. Now, another great automation that would actually potentially work, and this actually kind of goes with your new prospects, would be permissions. Now, usually everyone kind of has the permission set to everyone, but if you have it where maybe we want hot prospects to be permissioned to certain people, you can actually set that limitation straight from here as well. So again, I built this one out and I have it so aptly named brand new prospects. And again, similar to our earlier linking the workflow of the prospects, this is going to be based off of a contact being added trigger event. So again, I always like to put in the description, if you have someone who just goes and cleans house all the time, always put the do not delete if we know we need it still. And then again, I just like to give a brief description. So Anyone who's brand new or anyone who's not familiar with an automation can quickly read that description and go, oh, that's what this is. You just be able to answer those questions as you go. So again, brand new prospects, contact being added. What do I want it to do? I actually want it to set permissions. So again, we have that option to email a user, link a workflow, set a field, which I will do in just a second here, and set permissions. So I want this to be permission to a particular user. It could be a team instead if you'd like. It's really great if you have like a prospecting team or an onboarding team, you can limit it to that. And then the item as the actual user itself. So I just picked Tucker McLaughlin. Great person here, so we'll pick that one. And then if you have any conditions here as well. So similar again to our prospecting link workflow scenario earlier, I want the status to be prospect and I want that category to be hot here as well. So again, rule of thumb, what do I want this to do? Brand new prospects of contacts being added. I want to set that permission of a user, specifically Tucker, based upon a prospect and a hot status and category. So again, I'm actually just going to cancel it out because I didn't make any changes. If I did make changes though, I would want to update that automation. And I'm actually going to pull up Loki again since we added him earlier. And he had those particular scenario of a prospect in a hot category. So we saw that active workflow get linked. Now permissions are actually going to be on the left-hand side under more. And you kind of keep scrolling and you'll see permissions and roles. So here I have my contact permissions, my user, and Tucker McLaughlin. I didn't add this. It automatically added it based on that automation. So as you can kind of see here, by doing just one particular thing and having those already preset, you can actually do a couple of things all in one sitting. So it can be really helpful with that particular item. Another thing that actually would be really helpful is if you have the same servicing advisor. So if you have it where consistently one servicing advisor is always for prospects with a category of hot, we'll go with that with this example. Or if you have it where every time a client is an active client now and they're brand new, the same situation, if you have them as that servicing advisor, we can actually preset that. And to do that, we're going to build another one. So we'll pick our name in the top right corner, manage your account, and come down to automation templates again. So we'll click here and then we're going to click add. So again here, I want to make it something pretty obvious here. So I'm going to put it prospects servicing advisor. And actually, you know, I want to make it even more specific. I want to make it hot prospects servicing advisor. And I want the triggering event also to be a contact added. Now in here, you can definitely do multiple things here. So like if someone comes in and updates an address, you can always alert other people saying, hey, this has been done. That way they don't have that like, oh, when did they move later on? You can have it emailed, same with if it's changed, phone, email, they all kind of work the same concept. For the most part, the most common things that I see with automations are going to be a contact added, activity added are usually the most popular ones. So in here, again, I'm actually going to pick that contact added again. And I'm going to have in here, do not delete, please. Question mark, exclamation, we'll make it really kind of questionable. And then this is for our hot prospects who are brand new. The servicing advisor is the same. Just so again, so I know. So I have my hot prospect servicing advisor based on that contact being added. And then what do I want it to do? So in this example, I'm actually going to have it as this set field. So I'll click on this set field. My action type, I want it to contact servicing advisor. And then who's the person I want involved? And again, I'm going to pick Tucker because he's phenomenal. We'll have Tucker McLaughlin as this. So again, I could create this automation and every single time a contact has been added, we'd have that servicing advisor of Tucker added. Now, if you only have one servicing advisor, that's perfectly fine. However, if you have it where there's multiple and they're kind of set for particular items, again, you're going to want to pick those if all or if any. And kind of similar to my comment earlier, most of the time it's going to be very specific when we set these guidelines. So an if all is most likely what you will do. However, it's not always the case. And I'll show you another example of that. So again, new condition, And I'm going to stick with my theme here of my contact status equal to prospect. Add my condition. And again, I'm going to come in here, add that contact category equal to hot. So again, before we launch it, we're like, yep, good to go. Always read it through just to make sure we don't just automatically trigger a bunch of bad data. So we have our hot prospect servicing advisor based upon a contact being added. We want to set our servicing advisor to Tucker McLaughlin based upon the fact that that contact being added has a prospect and hot status and category. Sounds perfect to me. I'm going to create that automation. So this next one is actually going to have a couple of items triggered on it. So I'm going to get another contact I'm going to add in here. And again, I'm going to stay on that kind of superhero theme. She's not technically a superhero, but she's phenomenal. We have good old Margaret Carter, aka Peggy. I'm going to add her in here. So again, I'm not going to focus too much right now on all of the details, spouses, family, all that. I can always go in and add that later on. But I'm going to come on down here till contact details pops up. So here I have, and pick that status as prospect again. Pick that category as hot again. Ignore everything else for right now and create that new contact. All right. So here we are. We have that one active workflow for that important information that we set up earlier. We also have our servicing advisor set to Tucker McLaughlin now. And if I go over to my permissions and roles, I also will have my user contacted as Tucker as well. So I have 3 automations for one brand new contact, which as you can see flows pretty seamlessly. Now you can always, again, add as many active workflows. So if I immediately am setting up a meeting, I can have another workflow get triggered based upon that activity being added. And then you'd see 2 active workflows. So you can have, again, multiple automations running for almost the same thing. Now you could literally have it where this contact being added alone adds an email or sends an email to a user or client team. So you can have multiple. One other pretty big automation that you might run into, again, your name and manager account, would be if a status changes. So you can, it's going to be very similar. You'd base it still based upon that contact status being changed, or in this instance, maybe we want it to be emailed out. So it's kind of a gloom and doom scenario here, but it is life. We have it where we have an inactive or a deceased contact. So in this particular scenario, I've named it pretty self-explanatory here, inactive deceased email, and then we have our triggering event as our contact status being changed. So in my description here, I have it literally sends an email to all staff members regarding inactive deceased clients. So we'll come over to do this action. And I, in this case, want it to email the team. Now you could also link a workflow. We do have it where it's an inactive and deceased workflow. That usually comes into effect if you send out like kind of a bereavement gift. If you have other systems you need to update, you want to make sure that that also gets updated there. And another big one, if you have it where they're deceased, remove their birthday, so that way a year from now you don't accidentally send a birthday card, because that would be really terrible. So let's not do that. But in this one, I just want to let the team know, hey, this has happened. So I'll email the team, and I want it to be all staff. I can pick a specific team here I have, or again, you could pick a specific user. I'm just going to do email team all staff. Now, this is one of those scenarios where an if all wouldn't necessarily always be correct. You could definitely do that. But in this case, I want it to be 2 different things, because I actually have 2 different statuses. I have an inactive and a deceased. Now, an inactive, we kind of look at that as like a former client. We don't like to full on remove them from our database, just on the off chance that they decided today they don't want to be our client, but come 2 months from now, maybe they'll be back. And all we have to do is just change that status. We still have all of that history. We just have to update them to active. So that's our inactive. Now, deceased, we still like to add that in there only because we still can link our families over to that and keep all of that note history. But we still have, again, our inactive and deceased. So we don't want to do an if all, because you can't be 2 statuses at the same time. In this instance, we want an if any. So either inactive or deceased. And again, this is going to email the notification. So if you were to run this automation for, let me just pull up someone here. I don't want to kill Steve, but in this instance, if we did have it where we changed this status to inactive or deceased, that email would be triggered to everyone that's on that all staff team. So that is something that would happen kind of like behind the scenes. Or again, if you have it where it links a workflow and you update the status, that workflow would actually just auto-populate here. And again, you just work it like normal. So you have quite a few options with automations, and again, quite a few that can kind of overlap. You can have it where the same situation of a contact status being changed could email a client, or email a user or team. It could also link a workflow. So you can have multiple set up for even the same situation, just depending on what exactly you're looking for. The one thing to always keep in mind is that it's always going to have to attach to a contact itself. Obviously, if there's no contact, there's no automation that can be triggered for it. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And then the other itself is that it's going to be based upon what exactly you're doing here. So if you're not seeing an automation working, again, make sure that we have that workflow still existing and everything's still going, it's active, all that good part. If you see anything where you're just like, well, when did all of a sudden I get 500 workflows open on this? Chances are high you didn't set the if all or if any condition, and it's just adding to everyone. But that's always going to be based upon either, again, if you do it that way, an activity being added or a contact being added. So those are just a couple of things to keep in mind.
Thanks so much for joining us today for this particular session. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call at 800-206-5030, option 3 for support, or just shoot us an email over to support@redtailtechnology.com. Thanks a lot and have a great day.